Chapter 1. Wren had never minded the rain. If anything, she had come to think of it as a kind of gift, the sort that arrived without asking and asked nothing back. Her house sat on the north curve of the lake, low and modern, mostly glass along the waterside, and on mornings like this one the whole building seemed to lean quietly into the weather, listening. She had woken early, before the rain properly started, to a sky the colour of an old coin, and had known at once what sort of day it would be. There is a particular stillness that comes before a long soft rain, a kind of held breath in the birds and in the water, and Wren had learned over the years to recognize it the moment she opened her eyes. She had lain in bed a while simply listening to that stillness, in no hurry to break it. By the time she came downstairs, the light through the kitchen window had turned the flat, pewter grey that meant the rain was no more than an hour off, and she made her coffee slowly, the way she always did on such mornings, grinding the beans by hand rather than using the little electric grinder, because the sound of it, the low steady crunch, seemed to belong to this kind of day in a way that the whir of a machine did not. She carried the cup through to the conservatory while it was still too hot to drink, and set it on the little table beside her chair, where it would sit cooling, mostly forgotten, for the better part of an hour. This too was part of the ritual, though she had never thought of it as one until this moment, standing at the glass with her hands wrapped loosely around the warm cup, watching the first drops arrive on the lake's surface, small dark rings appearing and vanishing before the rain properly settled into itself. The conservatory ran the length of the house, a long room of glass and pale wood that caught the lake on one side and the garden on the other, and it was, without any real competition, Wren's favourite room in the world. She had chosen the house for it, she liked to say, though that was not quite true. She had chosen the house for the quiet, and the conservatory was simply where the quiet gathered most thickly, the way warmth gathers in the corner of a room nearest the fire. Now the rain came down in long, unhurried threads, silvering the surface of the lake until it looked less like water and more like something poured from a jug of hammered pewter. The far shore, usually a soft green line of trees, had vanished into mist entirely. Even the 2 willows that marked the end of her garden were softened into grey suggestions of themselves, more remembered than seen, their long trailing branches swaying just faintly with each gust that came in off the water. She liked days like this. She liked them the way some people liked a held breath, or the pause between one page of a book and the next, a stretch of time that asked nothing of her at all. There was a woodstove at the far end of the conservatory, small and black and round-bellied, with a little mica window through which the flames showed a soft orange movement, and she had lit it not long after coming down, feeding it slowly with kindling and then 2 good split logs, waiting patiently for the draw to catch before closing the door most of the way. It ticked now and then as the metal warmed, small contented sounds, settling into itself the way the whole house seemed to be settling into the day. The room smelled of woodsmoke and the particular mineral smell that rain brings up out of stone and soil, a smell she had never been able to properly name but always recognized instantly, drifting in through the one window she kept cracked despite the weather, because she liked to hear the rain as well as see it. There was something about hearing it, the soft, continuous whisper of it against leaves and stone and glass, that made the watching of it feel complete in a way it otherwise would not have. Wren settled into her chair with the blanket pulled up over her knees, tucked the edges beneath her thighs the way she always did, and looked out at the grey morning for a long while before reaching for anything at all. She did not watch television in any regular way. She had no real interest in what was new, in what everyone else happened to be discussing that particular month, and had found, over the years, that she preferred her stories a good deal older than herself. What she liked on afternoons such as this was to work her way slowly through the old films, the ones shot in black and white or in colors so soft they seemed remembered rather than filmed, the ones nobody made any more because nobody had the patience for them and because so few people were left who could narrate one properly, in a voice that understood the film was not to be rushed through. The set she had found some months back, a great crumbling archive of restored prints gathered from some old broadcasters' vaults, came with a woman's voice laid gently over each introduction, and it was for this voice, if she was honest with herself, that Wren kept returning to the collection at all. The films themselves were pleasant enough, certainly, full of hats and painted backdrops and actors who moved as though every gesture had been rehearsed 100 times until it looked effortless. But it was the voice she came back for. It was an Irish voice, soft, unhurried, with a lilt that rose and fell like something being rocked rather than spoken. It never rushed a sentence. It never seemed to need to. And in the months since Wren had first found the collection, she had come to feel that the voice understood something about time that most people, herself included on her busier days, had simply forgotten. She pressed play. "Now then," the voice began, warm as the stove beside her. "Here is a picture made a very long time ago, when the world moved a good deal slower than it does today, and nobody minded that in the least." Wren smiled without quite meaning to and settled back into the chair, feeling something in her shoulders loosen that she had not noticed was tight. The film itself hardly mattered, not really. It was something about a ferry crossing, black and white. The actors moving with that particular unhurried grace old films seemed to specialize in, as though even walking across a room deserved its full and unhurried attention. A man in a hat leaned against a railing, looking out at painted waves that rocked gently on some studio floor a very long way from any real sea. A woman in a coat too smart for the weather stood beside him, saying very little, her face turned toward the horizon that did not exist. But it was the narrator Wren was really listening to, and every so often, when the story of the ferry crossing grew a little thin, she would pause the film entirely and let the introduction play again from the start, just to hear the voice settle into its rhythm, the way it lingered on certain words as though testing their weight before setting them carefully down, like someone placing cups back onto their saucers without a sound. "There now," the voice said somewhere in the middle of the second reel. "Watch how the light comes in along the deck there. They would have waited the better part of a morning for that, you know. Nobody in such a hurry then." Rain went on falling outside the glass, steady and unbothered by anything happening within the room. It came in gusts sometimes, flung sideways by some small shift of wind off the lake, rattling faintly against the panes before settling again into its long, steady thread. A duck went by low over the water at one point, unbothered by the weather entirely, trailing a soft wake that the rain erased almost as quickly as it was made, two neat lines closing back into stillness within moments. Wren got up once, partway through the second film, to refill her coffee, which had gone cold and forgotten the way it always did on mornings such as this, and stood a moment at the kitchen window with the kettle ticking beside her, watching the way the rain pooled and ran along the stone path outside, gathering in the small dip near the gate where it always gathered, forming a shallow silver puddle that would be gone again by evening. She did not hurry back. There was, after all, nowhere else the morning needed her to be, and she had long since stopped feeling any guilt about that. There had been a time, years ago now, when she might have felt she ought to be doing something more productive with a morning like this, something with a visible result at the end of it. She did not feel that any longer. The morning was itself its own result, if it needed one at all. When she returned to the conservatory, cup refilled and warm again in her hands, the film had moved on without her, and she let it, more interested now in simply half watching the shapes of light and shadow cross the screen than in any particular plot. She had long ago stopped minding when she missed things in these old films. Stories like these did not seem built for following closely, the way a modern film insisted on being followed, plot points arriving like appointments that could not be missed. These old stories seemed built for drifting alongside, the way one might drift alongside a friend on a long walk, without needing to hold a conversation the entire time. The narrator returned near the end of the second film, her voice a little quieter now, as though the room itself had asked her to lower it. "And that is the last of the reel," she said. "A fine old thing, that one. Sit with it a while before you move on to the next, if you've a mind to. There's no hurry on you at all." Wren did sit with it. She let the credits roll in silence, watching the white lettering swim slowly up out of the grey, listening to the rain instead of any music, because there was none, these old prints having lost their scores somewhere along the years of poor storage and careless handling, and she found she did not mind that either. The rain filled in perfectly well, better perhaps than any composed music could have managed, being entirely without artifice or intention. The stove ticked lower, its first fierce heat settling into something steadier and more patient. Somewhere outside a heron passed low over the reeds at the lake's edge, its wings barely stirring the grey air, and was gone into the mist before she had properly registered it, no more than a suggestion of grey against grey, there and then not. She thought, not for the first time, that she had built rather a good life for herself here, not a large one, not a loud one, but a good one all the same, and entirely her own, built out of small choices that nobody else had needed to approve of. There was no one she needed to explain the morning to, no one waiting on the other end of a telephone to ask what she had accomplished. No one to ask why she had spent 3 hours watching old films about ferries and hats and painted waves, or why the sound of a stranger's soft voice reading out introductions had come, over the months, to feel like something close to company. She supposed some people might have called it a lonely sort of morning. She did not feel it that way in the least. It felt, if anything, rather full of rain and wood smoke and the particular grey light that came off the lake on days like this, full of a voice that never once hurried her toward anything, full of a kind of contentment that she had worked a long time to arrive at, and had no intention of apologizing for now that she had it. The clock on the mantel, an old thing that had belonged to her grandmother and kept time only approximately, showed something close to 11, though Wren had stopped trusting it precisely years ago and simply used it as a general suggestion rather than a fact. 11 or thereabouts. The morning had a long way still to run. She thought she might make something for lunch before too long. Something simple, soup perhaps, the kind that could sit on the stove and fill the kitchen with a good smell while she went on with the films. But there was no urgency to that thought either. It drifted through her mind and settled somewhere at the back, to be attended to whenever it felt right and not a moment before. The next film began without her quite choosing it, the way these things did when you let the set run on its own gentle rhythm, one reel sliding into the next, the way the rain outside slid from one long thread into another, no visible seam between them. "Now here," the narrator said, her voice settling into the room like something taking a seat, "is a picture I am fond of, a quieter one than the last, I think, though you may find that no bad thing on a morning such as this." Wren pulled the blanket a little higher over her knees and reached for nothing at all, letting the film simply begin, letting the morning go on exactly as it wished to, with no assistance required from her beyond the willingness to sit still and watch the grey light move across the glass. Outside, the rain kept on, steady and unbothered, drawing its long silver threads down across the panes, and the lake received it the way it received everything, without complaint, without any hurry whatsoever, circle upon circle upon circle, spreading outward and vanishing, spreading outward and vanishing for as long as the sky cared to keep it up. She thought, watching it, that this was rather the whole point of a morning like this one, not to accomplish anything with it, simply to let it happen and to be present in her own quiet way for its happening. The film flickered on. The narrator's voice returned once more, low and soft, somewhere in the second reel, remarking gently on the quality of a certain shot, the patience it must have taken, the kind of care that nobody troubled themselves with any longer. Wren listened, half here and half somewhere pleasantly adjacent to here, and did not move from her chair again for a long while. Eventually, though, hunger made itself known in the mild, unhurried way it always did on days like this, less a demand than a gentle suggestion, and Wren rose and padded through to the kitchen in her socked feet, leaving the film paused on a frame of grey water and a grey sky that looked, she thought, not unlike the view through her own glass. The kitchen was smaller than the conservatory and a good deal warmer, tucked at the back of the house where the rain could be heard but not seen, and she liked it for exactly that reason on mornings such as this, a room where the weather was a sound rather than a sight. She took a leek from the basket by the door, still faintly damp with garden soil, and a few potatoes, and set about the slow, unhurried business of soup, chopping without any particular speed, letting the knife find its own rhythm against the board. She did not turn on the radio. She had thought about it, briefly, out of habit more than any real wish for it, and had decided against, preferring instead the small domestic sounds of the kitchen itself, the knife on the board, the low hiss of the gas catching, the particular clink of the good pan against the hob. Somewhere behind her, through the open door, The rain went on with its own soft business, and the two sounds together, hers and the weather's, seemed to fit rather well. She let the soup simmer longer than it strictly needed, because the smell of it filling the kitchen was itself a kind of pleasure she saw no reason to hurry past. She stood at the window while it cooked, watching the rain fall into the small stone bird bath at the edge of the patio, where it collected and overflowed in a thin silver thread down the side, over and over, the bird bath never quite managing to hold what the sky kept giving it. A robin came at one point and sat for a moment on the fence post nearest the window, feathers puffed against the wet, regarding the house with the particular blank confidence of a bird that had decided, correctly, that nothing here meant it any harm. It stayed only a minute or two before dropping down into the wet grass and vanishing from view, off about whatever small business robins occupied themselves with on such mornings. Wren carried her bowl back through to the conservatory rather than eating at the kitchen table, because the conservatory was where the day was happening, as far as she was concerned, and she saw no reason to remove herself from it for the sake of a meal. She settled back into her chair, blanket rearranged over her knees, bowl balanced carefully on the wide, flat arm that seemed built for exactly this purpose, and pressed play again. The narrator's voice returned as though it had simply been waiting there, patient, for her to come back. "There you are," it said, and Wren smiled again at the small, foolish pleasure of being addressed, even by a voice recorded years before she had ever found the archive, even by a woman who could have no idea that anyone at all was listening on a wet morning beside a lake she had certainly never seen. Now then, where were we? The soup was good, simple and warm, and she ate it slowly while the film went on, the fairy story having given way now to something else entirely, a slower picture about a house by a river, full of long shots of water moving past reeds and very little dialogue at all. Wren found she preferred it, if anything, to the fairy film. There was something in the pacing of it, in the narrator's evident fondness for it, that matched the pace of her own morning rather precisely. "This one," the voice said, somewhere past the halfway mark. They shot over the better part of a summer, waiting each day for the light to fall a particular way along the water. You'll not find patience like that any longer. It's a lost art, I think, the waiting. Wren finished her soup and set the bowl aside, and did not get up again for some time. The rain outside had settled into its steadiest rhythm yet, the sort that seemed less like weather passing through and more like weather that had simply decided to stay, comfortable and unhurried, for as long as it pleased. The lake had lost almost all its texture now, gone entirely to that soft pewter grey, broken only by the countless small rings where drops struck the surface, appearing and vanishing, a pattern with no beginning, and, as far as Wren could tell from where she sat, no particular end in sight either. She thought, watching it, that she could quite happily sit here the rest of the day and want for nothing more than exactly this: the stove, the rain, the voice, the grey light moving slowly across the glass. There would be more films yet before the light properly failed. There always were on days like this.